Springfield was no stranger to chaos, but the evening sun cast an eerie glow over the town, hinting at something far worse than a rogue nuclear meltdown or a poorly planned monorail. Lisa Simpson sat cross-legged on her bed, engrossed in a book about environmental science, when a piercing scream shattered her focus. She snapped the book shut and rushed to the window. Outside, neighbors darted through the streets, some clutching their heads, others shouting incoherently. A chill ran down her spine. This wasn't Springfield's usual brand of absurdity. Lisa grabbed her notebook, her go-to tool for unraveling mysteries, and jotted down her observations. Erratic behavior, heightened aggression, possible mass hysteria. She hesitated, then added, "Something feels wrong." Her instincts screamed that this was no ordinary Springfield fiasco. Downstairs, the TV blared with Kent Brockman's voice, reporting on the chaos. Springfield descends into madness. Is it the water? The donuts? Stay tuned for more panic. Lisa rolled her eyes. Typical. The next morning, Springfield Elementary was a ghost town. Half the students were absent, and those present were far from normal. Ralph Wiggum gnawed on his desk, muttering about itchy friends inside his head. Nelson Muntz, usually content with punching, was now trying to bite Milhouse Van Houten, who squealed and hid behind Lisa. Even Mrs. Krabappel seemed off, her eyes glassy and her voice sharp as she snapped at the class for no reason. Lisa's pen flew across her notebook. Symptoms: aggression, disorientation, possible hallucinations. She underlined hallucinations twice. Something was infecting the town, and she needed answers. Back at 742 Evergreen Terrace, the Simpson household was no sanctuary. Marge stood in front of the bathroom mirror, her blue beehive sagging as she stared at a peculiar mark on her left eye. A dark, irregular patch that seemed to pulse faintly. "Oh, Marge, it's probably just stress," she muttered, but her hands betrayed her, clawing at her scalp. Strands of hair fell into the sink, tangled with tiny, wriggling shapes. She gasped, covering her mouth, but the sight burned into her mind. Worms, small and translucent, squirming in her hair. Marge stumbled back, her usual calm unraveling. "Homer! Lisa! Something's wrong!" she called, her voice trembling. Lisa, hearing her mother's panic, raced upstairs. She found Marge hunched over the sink, her hands shaking. "Mom, what's happening?" Lisa asked, her scientific curiosity warring with fear. Marge turned, and Lisa froze. The patch on Marge's eye had grown, and her scalp was raw, dotted with more worms. I don't know, sweetie," Marge whispered, her voice strained. "It itches so much and I can't stop." She tugged at her hair again, and a clump came loose, worms spilling onto the floor. Lisa's stomach churned, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Mom, sit down, I'll figure this out," she said, guiding Marge to the bed. Her notebook was already open. Physical symptoms: scalp irritation, worms, eye discoloration. Downstairs, the chaos escalated. Bart lounged on the couch, surrounded by empty chip bags, candy wrappers, and a half-eaten pizza. His eyes were wild, and his fingers twitched as he tore into a loaf of bread. Maggie, clutching her pacifier, toddled into the room and froze as Bart's head snapped toward her. "Yo, Maggie, you got any snacks?" he growled, his voice unnaturally low. Before Lisa could intervene, Bart lunged, teeth bared, aiming for Maggie's arm. Maggie squealed, dodging behind the couch. Lisa sprinted down the stairs, shoving Bart back. "Bart, stop it! What's wrong with you?" she shouted. Bart blinked, confused, then clutched his stomach. "I'm so hungry, dude, like starving." Lisa's pen scratched furiously. Extreme hunger, violent impulses. Maggie, unharmed but shaken, clung to Lisa's leg. Lisa knelt, checking her sister for injuries. Maggie seemed fine, no marks, no worms. "Possible immunity?" Lisa wrote, circling the question. She needed more data, but the house felt like a ticking time bomb. Marge's condition was worsening. Upstairs, Bart was a loose cannon, and Homer. Where was Homer? Lisa's heart sank. Her dad was probably at Moe's, oblivious to the apocalypse unfolding. As if on cue, Homer burst through the front door, sweating and scratching his head. "Marge! Lisa! I ate a bad donut and now my brain's all tingly," he bellowed, holding up a moldy pastry. Lisa groaned. "Dad, don't eat that," she said, snatching it away. But as she looked closer, she saw tiny worms crawling on the donut's surface. Her eyes widened. "Dad, where did you get this?" Homer shrugged. "Some guy at the plant was handing them out. Said they were extra protein." Lisa's mind raced. The power plant. Ground zero. She added to her notes. Potential. Source. Contaminated food. Possibly donuts. The TV flickered with another Kent Brockman update. Springfield streets are overrun. Citizens are eating each other's lawns. The mayor has fled. Lisa switched it off. She couldn't rely on the news or the town's leaders. She needed to act. "Maggie, stay close," she said, grabbing her sister's hand. "Bart, don't bite anyone. Mom, I'm going to get help." Marge nodded weakly, her eyes distant. Bart just grunted, raiding the fridge again. Lisa's resolve hardened. She'd seen Springfield survive alien invasions and dome imprisonments. But this was different. This was personal. Stepping outside, Lisa saw the full scope of the infestation. Mr. Burns shuffled down the street, worms trailing from his ears. Lenny and Carl fought over a sandwich, their faces covered in sores. Even Santa's little helper whimpered in the yard, scratching at his fur. Lisa's notebook filled with grim details. Widespread infection, rapid spread, no clear origin. She clutched Maggie tighter, her mind racing. If she didn't find a way to stop this, Springfield and her family would be lost. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the town, Lisa made a decision. She'd start at the library, digging into medical and biological texts. If this was a parasite, there had to be a way to fight it. But as she took her first step, a guttural growl echoed behind her. Bart stood in the doorway, worms wriggling in his hair, his eyes locked on her. "Lisa," he rasped, "I'm really hungry." Lisa's heart pounded. She grabbed Maggie and ran, her notebook tucked under her arm, the weight of Springfield's survival on her shoulders. Lisa Simpson sprinted through the darkening streets of Springfield, Maggie clinging to her back, her notebook bouncing in her hand. Bart's guttural growls faded behind them, but the town was far from safe. Infected residents staggered through, yards tearing at their scalps or gnawing on anything edible, grass, trash, even each other. Lisa's heart raced as she dodged a snarling Mrs. Skinner, worms wriggling in her hair. The library was her destination, but first, she needed a safe place to think. She ducked into the Quickie Mart, hoping Apu could help. Inside, the store was a wreck. Shelves were toppled, and Apu stood behind the counter, clutching a baseball bat. "Lisa, thank goodness," he exclaimed, his voice shaky. "These worms, they're everywhere." Lisa noticed a faint mark on his eye, but said nothing. She set Maggie down and scanned the store. Milhouse Van Houten cowered in the corner, scratching his head furiously. "Milhouse, are you okay?" Lisa asked, approaching cautiously. He looked up, his eyes glassy. "It itches, Lisa, and I'm so hungry." Worms spilled from his scalp, confirming her fears. "Infected," she scribbled in her notebook. But Milhouse wasn't violent, yet he could be useful. Lisa made a snap. Decision. "Apu, I need to study this. Can we use your back room?" Apu nodded, locking the front door. Lisa led Milhouse and Maggie to the cramped storage room, filled with expired squishies and dusty crates. She sat Milhouse on a box and began examining him, noting his symptoms. Hunger, disorientation, worms in hair, eye discoloration. Maggie, still unmarked, watched silently, sucking her pacifier. Lisa jotted down, "Maggie's immunity confirmed? Need to test." She turned to Milhouse. "I'm going to take a sample, okay?" He whimpered but nodded. Using a pair of tweezers from her backpack, Lisa plucked a worm from his scalp. It writhed in her grip, translucent and pulsing. She sealed it in a plastic bag, her stomach turning. Meanwhile, Homer Simpson was causing his own chaos. Convinced he could outrun the infestation, he'd piled into the family car, only to crash into a lamppost 2 blocks from home. "Dough," he groaned, rubbing his head. His scalp itched. Worse than ever, and he felt a gnawing hunger no donut could satisfy. As he stumbled from the wreckage, Ned Flanders appeared, his usual cheer replaced by grim determination. "Homer, neighborino, you're hurt. Come with me," Ned said, pulling him toward his house. Homer, too dazed to argue, followed, scratching furiously. Ned's house was a fortress, windows boarded, doors barricaded. Inside, Ned and Homer sat in tense silence, each eyeing the other warily. Ned's left eye had a faint mark, and Homer's scalp was raw from scratching. "You feeling okay, Homer?" Ned asked, gripping a crowbar. Homer shrugged, tearing into a bag of chips he'd found. "Just hungry, Flanders. You got any donuts?" Ned frowned. "You're not infected, are you?" Homer laughed, but a worm fell from his hair onto the table. Both men froze. Mutual suspicion, Lisa would have written if she were there. Ned tightened his grip on the crowbar, and Homer's eyes darted to the door. Back at the Quickie Mart, Lisa's research intensified. She rigged a makeshift microscope from spare parts, studying the worm sample. "It's parasitic," she muttered, sketching its structure. Segmented body, neural manipulators. The worms were controlling their hosts, driving their hunger and aggression. Maggie tugged at her sleeve, pointing to a book on parasites Lisa had grabbed from the store's magazine rack. "Good find, Maggie," Lisa said, flipping through it. The book confirmed her theory. The worms hijacked the nervous system, amplifying primal urges. But how had they spread so fast? Contaminated food source. "Donuts," she wrote, recalling Homer's moldy pastry. Outside Springfield, Marge was spiraling. After Bart's attack, she'd fled the house, her mind clouded by hunger and pain. Worms crawled beneath her skin, and her eye patch had spread, distorting her vision. She stumbled into an alley where Bart found her, his own condition worse. His hair was gone, replaced by a writhing mass of worms. "Mom, I'm starving," he growled, lunging. Marge swung a frying pan she'd grabbed from home, knocking him back. "Bart, no!" she screamed, tears streaming. She ran, her maternal instincts battling the parasite's control. Familial conflict escalates. Lisa's notes would read. At Ned's, the tension snapped. Homer, desperate for food, lunged at Ned's pantry, knocking over a shelf. The crash broke a window, and infected townsfolk, Lenny, Carl, and a snarling Mo, pounded at the boards. "Homer, you've doomed us!" Ned shouted, shoving him back. Homer's hunger surged, and he bared his teeth. "I need food, Flanders!" he roared, worms spilling from his mouth. Ned raised the crowbar, but the infected broke through, forcing them to flee upstairs. Exposure to external threat, Lisa's notebook would note. In the Quickie Mart's back room, Lisa made a breakthrough. Comparing Milhouse's symptoms to Maggie's lack of them, she hypothesized that Maggie's immune system resisted the worms. Neural control. "If I can isolate her antibodies, I might make a cure," she whispered. But Milhouse was deteriorating, his hunger turning violent. He grabbed a crate, ready to throw it when Apu burst in, bat raised. "Lisa, we've got company!" he yelled. Through the store's window, Lisa saw a mob of infected, Mr. Burns, Skinner, and others, closing in. "Time running out," she wrote, grabbing Maggie and her notes. The cure was possible, but she needed a lab, and fast. As the mob battered the Quickie Mart's door, Lisa's mind raced. The school's science lab might have what she needed, but getting there meant braving the infested streets. Milhouse groaned, worms now crawling from his eyes. Apu stood guard, but his own eye mark was spreading. Lisa clutched Maggie, her resolve steeling. "We're not giving up," she said, her voice firm. Springfield was falling apart, but she'd fight for her family and her town. The Quickie Mart's door shuddered under the fists of Springfield's infected, their guttural snarls echoing through the store. Lisa Simpson clutched Maggie, her notebook pressed against her chest, as Apu swung his bat at the splintering wood. Milhouse, now barely coherent, writhed on the floor, worms spilling from his mouth. "Lisa, we can't hold them," Apu shouted, his own eye mark darkening. Lisa's mind raced. The school's science lab was her only shot at synthesizing a cure from Maggie's immunity, but the infested streets stood between them and salvation. "Apu, we need to move, now," she said, grabbing a fire extinguisher as a makeshift weapon. With Maggie on her back, she kicked open the back door, and they fled into the night. Across town, Ned Flanders and Homer Simpson were cornered in Ned's attic, the infected, led by a snarling Mo, clawing at the trapdoor. Ned clutched a hunting rifle he'd kept for emergencies, his hands trembling. "Homer, we gotta pray for a miracle," he stammered. Homer, scratching worms from his scalp, growled, "I'd settle for a donut." His hunger was overwhelming, but a flicker of his old self remained, urging him to protect Ned. When Mose broke through the trapdoor, Homer tackled it, yelling, "Back off, you parasite!" Ned seized the moment, firing a warning shot that scattered the mob temporarily. "Homer, we're heading to the school. Lisa might be there," Ned said, dragging him toward the window. Meanwhile, Marge and Bart, their minds warped by the worms, had fused into a grotesque parody of themselves. Their bodies, melded by the parasite's influence, shambled through Springfield, driven by an insatiable hunger. Marge's blue beehive was a writhing nest, and Bart's spiky hair was gone, replaced by a pulsating mass. They stumbled into an abandoned lot, where Marge's maternal instincts briefly surfaced. "Bart, my baby," she rasped, tears mixing with worms. Bart's voice, distorted, replied, "Gotta eat, Mom." The creature they'd become roared, drawn to the scent of uninfected flesh, and lurched toward the school. At Springfield Elementary, Lisa, Apu, and Maggie slipped through a side entrance, the lab just ahead. Apu collapsed, his infection worsening. "Go, Lisa," he gasped, handing her the bat. Lisa nodded, tears in her eyes, and ran with Maggie to the lab. Inside, she found chaos. Broken beakers, spilled chemicals, and, unexpectedly, Selma and Patty Bouvier, Marge's sisters, rummaging through supplies. "Lisa, you're alive!" Patty barked, her cigarette dangling. Selma, eyeing Maggie, added, "That kid's our ticket out of this mess." Lisa froze. "What do you mean?" Selma smirked. "She's immune, right? We need her blood, maybe more." Lisa stepped back, clutching Maggie. "No way. I'll find another way." Selma ignored her, snatching a scalpel and cutting a lock of Maggie's hair. "This'll do for a start," she said, tossing it into a centrifuge. Lisa's outrage boiled, but she focused on the lab equipment, rigging a microscope and centrifuge to analyze Maggie's sample. Her notes spilled across the table. Antibodies in Maggie's blood neutralize worms' neural control. She worked, feverishly, synthesizing a crude antidote, but Selma's impatience grew. "Hair's not enough, kid. We need tissue," she snapped, advancing. Lisa grabbed a beaker of acid, ready to defend Maggie, when the lab door burst open. Ned and Homer stumbled in, pursued by the Bart-Marge creature. Its dual voices, Bart's manic cackle and Marge's distorted wail, filled the room. "Hungry," it roared, lunging at Homer. Ned fired the rifle, grazing its arm, but it barely slowed. Homer, driven by a surge of paternal instinct, tackled the creature, pinning it against a wall. "Marge, Bart, snap out of it," he bellowed, worms crawling across his face. The creature hesitated, Marge's eyes flickering with recognition. But the worms tightened their grip, and it swiped at Homer, knocking him down. Lisa seized the moment, pouring her antidote into a spray bottle. "Maggie, stay back," she shouted, aiming at the creature. The mist hit its face and it shrieked, worms dissolving in its hair. The creature staggered, Bart and Marge's forms separating slightly, their eyes clearing for a moment. Antidote partially effective, Lisa scribbled, but the dose was too weak. She needed more of Maggie's antibodies, and time she didn't have. Selma, seeing the antidote work, lunged for Maggie again, but Patty intervened, shoving her sister back. "Enough, Selma! You're acting like one of them!" she snapped. Selma snarled, grabbing a scalpel and stabbing Patty in the shoulder. Patty gasped, collapsing as Selma turned on Lisa. Ned, reloading the rifle, shouted, "Lisa, run!" But Lisa stood her ground, spraying Selma with the antidote. Selma screamed, worms melting from her scalp, but her rage persisted. "You're ruining everything," she spat, lunging. Maggie, with surprising speed, tossed a beaker at Selma's feet, tripping her. Lisa grabbed Maggie and the antidote, sprinting for the lab's back exit. Ned covered them, firing at the recovering Bart Marge creature, while Homer crawled to Patty, helping her up. "Hang in there, chain smoker," he muttered. Outside, Lisa and Maggie hid in the school's boiler room, the antidote bottle nearly empty. Lisa's notebook was a mess of frantic scribbles. "Need larger dose, better delivery system." The creature's roars echoed nearby, and Selma's footsteps weren't far behind. Ned and Homer, with a wounded Patty, barricaded themselves in a classroom, but the infected were closing in. Lisa looked at Maggie, her sister's wide eyes full of trust. "We're gonna save them," Lisa whispered, her resolve unshaken. I began sketching a plan to amplify the antidote, knowing the next move could mean life or death for Springfield.